Hello and good evening, everyone. This is Shauna K. Pottinger. I want to welcome you all to my live feed tonight. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I am so excited to spend some time with you tonight as we talk about something that's deeply personal. Um, Personal for everyone, but more personal for me because it has to do with marriage. And when I talk about marriage, I'm not necessarily talking about those Instagram perfect versions. I'm talking about like the real messy and sometimes heartbreaking reality that two people can face when they're building a life together. I have been married for 17 years to the love of my life, Jamie Pottinger. And during that period of time, we've gone through peaks and valleys in our relationship. And I wanted this evening just to hop on here and share an amazing resource that I will be putting out that I believe is going to bless you. It's going to bless your marriage. Um, the word fortress came to me about 4.5 years ago as I was going through the Bible and studying the book of Nehemiah. And I'll tell you this, while reading the passage, it became very clear to me that Nehemiah had a very daunting task on hand. And the Holy Spirit gave me the idea of the fortress as I read it, because when I looked through the steps that Nehemiah himself took in order to rebuild what was broken, to restore the walls of Jerusalem, I said to myself, this is the blueprint. This is it. The word fortress is so useful in so many contexts, but when you apply it to marriage, it is one of the most powerful forces. And I can't wait for you to get that resource in hand. I am looking forward to you doing it. Now, I'm going to pause here because I want to see where my people who are joining me on the live are joining me from. If you are joining me from Florida, I want to go ahead and put it in the chat because I want to just say a special shout out to my people from Florida. Where are you joining me from this evening? I'd love to hear. I'd love for you to just drop something in the chat so we can know that you're there. Looking forward to hearing and interacting with you this evening as we talk about this amazing new project. Where are you joining me from? Come on, I know I see that you're here, guys. I see that a bunch of you are on the stream. I just want to hear from you. Where are you joining us from this evening? So yeah, I was telling you guys that one of the things that popped in my head when it comes on to the fortress was an acronym. I used it as an acronym, and this acronym really came from something that the Holy Spirit gave me. Nehemiah, the first thing he did when after he came out of his sadness and feeling sorrowful about Jerusalem and the broken walls and the need to restore it, the first thing he did was that Nehemiah started to fast and pray. And then he openly confessed to God. And so that entire series of action, I think, provides married couples with a blueprint that can help them to navigate the very difficult challenges that they face as a couple. So I wrote The Love Fortress, this book right here. I don't know, it's going to be available in all the places that you buy books come September 1st. But this book, The Love Fortress, it came across my mind, and I said to myself, how do I put it and package it in a way that people will be able to relate to it? And the way I wrote it was in the form of a story. And so you will meet in the book a couple by the name of Michael and Sophia. And you will follow them along their own journey as they went through the struggles of rebuilding their fortress. Um, and so the fortress acronym, as I mentioned, it was from Nehemiah as he was trying to rebuild the walls. Anybody telling me where they're coming from yet? Let's see what we have here. I see that Claudine is here from Florida. It's so good to see you, my friend. I want to give you a special shout out. Thank you for the congratulatory remarks. Welcome, Claudine. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. So I've seen firsthand and experience what happens when you leave your marriage unprotected, right? I've seen couples who started out deeply in love with each other, but for some reason, something happened along the journey that caused them to drift apart. And if you're not careful, it can happen to us. It can happen to anyone if you take it for granted. I was at a conference today, and one of the speakers, one of the things she talked about is that if you want to drift, if you want to see things just drift and is swayed by every single wind that comes along, simply do nothing. And some of us are doing absolutely nothing to ensure that our marriages become a fulfilling journey throughout all the seasons of life. And there are going to come periods of time when your marriage is tested, when your fortress is tested, but we want to know that you're able to withstand those storms of life. And so one of the areas that I consider to be very important is for us to focus on what are some of the things that threaten our marriages. I know that in my case, some of the things that we're dealing with, welcome to the Hewitts. It's great to have you. Great to see you guys. Welcome. Special shout out to my extended family up there in PA. One of the things that I want to talk about are some of the pain points that we are currently dealing with as married couples. Let me see if we can get some shout out from you guys. There is the issue of constant miscommunication where you're talking to each other, but you're not hearing each other. And so you have constant bickering and arguments going on. You may have a situation or a scenario where you're trying to say something and the person is reading into the motives of why you're saying it. And so they're speaking and responding to the motives more so than listening to the facts of what is being said. Thumbs up if this you can relate to this. I know I can personally relate to it. Sometimes I read beyond what is said and I go to, oh, I think this is what you mean. You know, this is not what you, this is what you said, but I know this is what you mean, right? As if we can read minds. So that's another area that we have to work on. The other challenge that people face in marriage is emotional distance. Sometimes because we become a little hardened by life's challenges, right? We live in the same house, but we're basically miles apart from each other. We just, this is just a business arrangement. We treat it like it's a business arrangement. The next area that we struggle in is the loss of intimacy. And when I talk about the loss of intimacy, I'm not talking about just sexual intimacy or the physical intimacy. I'm talking about intimacy on the spiritual and emotional level. And I can tell you that once the emotional piece is absent, a lot of the other areas are going to fall apart, right? So we have the loss of intimacy. We talk about emotional distance, constant miscommunication. What are some of the other things married couples face? Go ahead and drop those in the chat. I want to hear from you. But I brought a list with me, right? Another pain point in marriage is lingering hurt because of unresolved conflicts, things that we never got to talk about, but it's still, it's eating at us. We're still upset. We're still angry because these things are happening. And because they remain unresolved, guess what? We use passive aggression. We sometimes stop doing things that we used to do that are sources of endearment and things that would draw your spouse to you. We stop doing them because guess what? We don't feel like it's worth it anymore. And so those are some of the areas where you see some issues. And then now, this is a big one. If there was ever an issue of past betrayal, somebody broke a promise. You went and you talked about your spouse openly with people that they don't even know and just make them look really bad in the community. There's been an affair, some kind of betrayal, whatever it is. These are some areas that can cause cracks in our fortresses. And all of these things are things that we deal with in the book. Feeling like you're roommates instead of partners. You literally don't feel like you're in partnership with this person because your lives don't intersect in any way. You don't do things together. You don't feel like you have anything left in common because you've grown apart. And so these are some areas where we take it for granted and we go about our lives and we feel like, okay, based on the economic setup. We're kind of relying on each other. And so we allow those things to feel like that's what's keeping the marriage together. We don't want that. We don't want to live in those situations and circumstances. So let's go again now. What's the other one? The last one that we tackle in there are the external stress factors that consistently gnaw at the fiber of our marriages and our fortress every single day. Guess why? Because we're facing financial turmoil. Sometimes you have situations where there's a loss of a job, a health crisis. These are all external factors that are threatening our marriage and love fortresses. And if we don't have a system in place that is able to withstand these storms, then I can tell you that your fortress will come falling down. And when you study fortresses, most of the countries or the towns or cities that have erected fortresses, they've had some kind of tactical advantage when they go to war. But here's a challenge, and I want to just share this hard truth with you. Here's a challenge. A fortress doesn't usually fall because of those external stress factors that I just mentioned a while ago. Usually, yes, people who have finances, they may end up in a lot of stress. They may end up in a lot of arguments and so on. But the marriage will not fall apart just because you've come under attack. Hear me well. Hear me. Hear me. Whenever your marriage fall apart, it has to be attributed to an inside job. What do I mean? It takes somebody on the inside working with enemy forces to bring down a fortress. And I know you can't disagree with me on that one, because that is such a powerful thing when it comes on to marriage. Remember now, when you're in a marriage, you and your spouse are supposed to be in lockstep. We're supposed to be in partnership, right? And if that is the case, if there's that level of unity that you guys have derived from praying together, being open and honest and not hiding your feelings, then you're going to get to a point where, regardless of what external factors are threatening your marriage, it will be able to withstand it. But here's where it is going to be ripped apart. It's going to be ripped apart when somebody on the inside decides, okay, you're no longer attractive, so I'm going to go and have an affair, right? Or finances is a mess. I cannot live in this situation anymore. So I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna do something that like sleep with somebody else or get money from somebody else, or whatever it is. But it takes somebody on the inside to join forces with the enemy to bring that marriage down. And I want you to, if you agree with me on that one, I want you to put a yes in the chat, because that is such a important factor and element. So within the fortress, what we are trying to do in this resource is to say to our couples that rather than fighting against your fortress, rather than tearing down this entity that is supposed to serve as a safe space, why not fight for it, right? Why not fight for it? Marriages don't just fall apart because, oh, we've come under some serious attacks recently. No, it falls apart because of pride, where one spouse was unwilling to apologize, where we carry secret grudges that never got resolved, and the silent resentment leads to bitterness, and then you end up becoming numb to certain situations, and then you can talk about certain things. Right? A fortress falls apart when we choose to withdraw, go to our rooms, right? When your spouse is trying to play a little footsie at night, guess what you do? Guess what you do? You pull your foot away, right? You don't want to have any connection. You try to avoid that connection. And then last but not least, a fortress will fall apart if you allow external voices to be prioritized over the voice of your spouse. This is where you allow your friends, your family to influence your marriage. They get to come in and they have a say in everything that goes on in your marriage, but your spouse doesn't have a voice because you don't respect your spouse's voice. That's a true recipe for disaster when it comes on to a fortress. And so the greatest threat to your marriage is not what's happening out there. It is what is happening on the inside of the marriage and on the inside of you. And so in the book, what I propose is are 8 important elements and behaviors that we have to practice as a couple. Both of us have to be working together in order to achieve this. 8 practices, and I'm going to just touch on them real quick. I'm not going to even explain them in depth because later on we'll talk about them. So let's hear where some people. I see Magali is here. Good to see you, Magali. Yes, I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Magali and Tasha. Right? So the F in fortress that I'll be talking about in the book, the F in fortress stands for fasting and prayer. And this is a big one because I can tell you that this is what helped or is helping me to cope in my marriage. I can tell you if that's the secret sauce behind the whole thing. If you want the real power, if you want to unlock power in your marriage, here's where I'm going to send you. Get in that prayer closet and pray for your spouse. But don't just pray. Fast and pray. Nehemiah, understand this. And if you're hearing me, I want you to go ahead and hit fasting. Just put the fasting for F in the chat for me. I just want to see that you're here and you're engaged in what we're talking about. Fasting and prayer is one of the most important factors. And if I talk to people and I literally ask them, if after they've had a divorce or anything, I can tell you that 100% of the individuals that I've had conversations with about their divorce, the majority of them have said, I have never fasted for my spouse. I have never fasted for my spouse. Can you believe that? Have you ever fasted just about your marriage or just fasted for your spouse or something that they're going through? I talk about this in the book and I don't want to spoil it for you, but my eyes really opened up to that when I was going through a major illness a couple of years ago. And I started to notice that Jamie wasn't coming home for his regular lunch after work, like usually, because we lived on a campus, a school campus, and he would go to work and come home for lunch occasionally. And I started to notice that he wasn't coming home for a couple of days. And then he would come home and then I'd share the food or I'll make the food. And he's saying to me that I'm not eating today. And I started to feel some type of way. And I remember when it finally hit me and I could not take it anymore. And I said to him, Jamie, what's going on? Why aren't you eating? And he said to me, for the past couple of days, I've been fasting and praying for you. And I remember what that did to me. It moved something on my inside because I felt so loved in that moment that he was spending time praying for me. And that's when I started to go on my own journey. And it was difficult at first. I'm not going to say that it's not difficult. Fasting and prayer is difficult. But we just recognize that that was a very important element when it comes on to our marriage. So if you're not doing it yet, now is the perfect time for you to start. Go ahead and fast and pray for your spouse. And then the O stands for openness and honesty, right? Openness and honesty. And I can tell you, there are a lot of individuals who are not necessarily giving their spouse their full heart. They don't necessarily expose their spouses to who they are for real because they don't think that their spouses can handle it. You're not allowed to express how you feel and your needs to your spouse. But at the heart of this is communication, right? Openness and honesty. We address that in the book. And then the next one is big, is respect. If you love your spouse, you will respect your spouse. And in many cases, there are some people who would even go as far as to say that men, especially, value respect more so than they value sexual intimacy. I don't know how true that is, if it is true, but I know that that's an important element when it comes on to my marriage. Respect. Go ahead and put respect in the chat so I can know that you're still here. Are you here still? Let's hear it. Right? So, respect is all about valuing each other's opinion, valuing each other's boundaries, and their personhood, their humanity. Is a way of saying, I respect your humanity. You humanize them. And there is always going to be the temptation for you when it comes on to marriage to just take your spouse for granted and just figure that, hey, if he's acting out and doing some things that I don't like, this is a perfect time for me to demonize them. Um, Whenever you think about doing that, I just want you to remember that respect is a very important pillar in your marriage. And if you attack respect, if you show disrespect, what eventually is going to happen is that your fortress is going to come apart, right? And then the next one is trust. This is a big one. I consider trust to be the cement in your fortress. It's what holds everything together, because for you to create a safe space, it takes trust. I don't trust you, or I will not trust you if I don't feel safe. And then the next one is reconciliation. And many of us don't practice this well. We don't know how to do it the right way. We tend to only feel the need to reconcile if it's more on a transactional basis. But I want to say this: it is better for you to learn the art of repairing what is broken, right? It's better for us to learn the art of repairing. And when I talk about repairing, I'm talking about healing. And that can only happen against a backdrop of letting your true feelings be heard. And when those feelings are heard and honored, then we can say, okay, let's go back and reconcile. And the Bible encourages us not to allow the sun to go down on our wrath. And so that's an important element as well. And then now we're coming on to this very important element, and it's a matter of enticement, right? So after the R, it's enticement. Type enticement in the chat. Enticement. Enticement really has to do with, hey, I am not going to take it for granted that the spark is going to remain there just because we are married and because I have a ring and we signed on a piece of paper that we're going to be married. Enticement says, I know that I have to keep working at enticing you, and I have to keep the spark alive. And you do this in many ways. And this book here, what I love about it is if you struggle with what to say or what to do in order to entice your spouse, there's lots and lots of cheat sheet and recommendations of some things that you can do to entice your spouse emotionally. It's basically saying to your spouse, you are desired. It's making them feel like you love them and you cannot get over the fact that you are so in love with them. So we want to make sure that we're trying to practice enticement in our marriages. Let's not take each other for granted. And then we're going to talk about biblical submission based on what the Bible describes as submission. And really what this is about is serving each other. Male serving female, female serving male, husband serving wife, wife serving husband. And you're doing it out of humility. You're not doing it because you want to dominate or show some level of hierarchy to say, oh, I am the male. I'm supposed to be in charge. God died and left me in charge of you. No, that's not what submission is about. And we're going to discuss that in depth. We're going to go back to the origination of the word. We're going to talk about what God meant when he made man and woman. All of that is outlined in the book in detail. And then my favorite one, the last S, is sexual satisfaction. And this is where we talk about the importance of maintaining physical intimacy, especially as you have children and you try to make space and room to ensure that that piece, that very important piece, that gift that God gave us in the marriage is protected. So listen, we've talked about a lot. We talked about the fortress. We talked about the inside job. We've talked about some of the pain points. But right now, I want to encourage you. To get a copy of this book. Thank you to all of you who joined us on here this evening, to every single one of you. I want you to get a copy of this book or to get in line to get a copy of this book The Love Fortress. Let me make sure that it's on the camera. There it is. It is going to also be available, if I may say, in the audio version. That is actually, so it will be on Audible, it will be on Apple audiobooks, and you'll be able to access it there. But if you're interested in getting your copy, I'm going to ask you to just go ahead and put a one in the chat. Put a one in the chat, and I will reach out to you directly and send you a pre-order link for you to get a copy of the Love Fortress when it drops on September 1st. Thank you so much for joining me on this live. Next week, I'm going to have a guest on here as we break down the fortress. We're going to break it down and we're going to build it right back up when we talk about fasting and prayer. Thank you so much for joining me on this live, and may God bless you. Have a wonderful Sabbath.